Hello, and welcome to You Can Grow Your Own Way, a conversation for parents and carers of neurodivergent children. I feel so privileged you are taking time out of your busy life to learn all about the ways to interpret neurodivergence for you and your child. Remember, all advice on this podcast is general and may not specifically apply to your child, so we encourage you to also talk to your GP, paediatrician or specialist to see if what you've learned will help your family. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today on You Can Grow Your Own Way, a conversation for parents and carers of neurodivergent children. Today, we are going to be grappling with a big topic. What is OT? It's not an easy one to define, and as you'll learn through our conversation with Steph Van Velzen, it is many things to many different people. So Steph has joined us on the podcast before. She was part of an episode we did on sensory processing, which is a fabulous one. I highly recommend going back and listening to it. And we're thrilled she can join us again today. Steph is the practice director of Uplift Therapy, a paediatric allied health service in Ballarat that specialises in supporting neurodivergent children and the families through their journey from early childhood through adolescence. Steph has over 14 years' experience as an occupational therapist, and she's passionate about supporting the whole family throughout the therapeutic process. She prioritises relationship and connection within the support she provides. Steph gets the most joy out of seeing children have that precious glimmer in their eyes when they feel loved and connected with their peers and the adults around them, within both their interactions and their play. Steph is a certified DIR floor-time therapist and a co-op therapist. She uses these approaches to support children to deepen their play and interactions and to develop their daily functional skills. Steph is also the OT for our Mr. 8, and I feel very privileged to have her as part of our support team, and we're in for a great conversation. So, Steph, welcome back. So incredibly excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Carly.
And so, just a really small topic. What is OT?
Yeah. What a big topic, right?
Yeah. And look, this is probably one of our first specialist definition episodes. And I thought we'd start here because OT is it's so integral in the world of neurodivergent support. But for a lot of people, it is an unknown in terms of the magic that goes on in consultations and sessions and how it all works. And it's definitely been seen these days to be such an important part of the skill set that we use to support our neurodivergent children. So, in terms of where to begin, it seemed really like the right place. Sorry to throw you in the deep end of having to explain the science of it all to us, but I couldn't think of anybody better to do it.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate it. And I think it is really interesting because I think we touch everything when it comes to goals, right? We don't have one beautiful little niche area that we can just hone in on that. But I do feel lucky to have that skill to be able to see that child as a whole, to be able to go, what's important for that child, what's important for that family, what's functional for them to be working on, and for me to be that part of that journey rather than necessarily having my one teeny tiny niche area. Although sometimes it would be nice to have one specialty area, I must say.
I think parents say that about kids as well. It'd be really lovely to just have one thing we're working on at a time. So, yeah, completely feel that. And I loved that explanation as well about how it's the goals of the child and the family and how they come together, which really it's just so fundamental. And I know you and I have spoken about, and we will get time, we will book it in, we will have that discussion on how you balance creating the autonomous decision-making of the neurodivergent child and how you also look at where their maturity sits in being able to make that decision, how much they understand about the world around them, and how you can also support the family. And that's such a huge chat that I really look forward to us having in the future. So the big high level, what is OT? And I'm actually going to get you, if it's okay, to explain OT and then to explain pediatric OT.
Yeah.
Because they are quite different in how they approach things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I believe being called an occupational therapist makes it really challenging from the get-go because people who haven't experienced occupational therapy often think, well, occupation, that's what I do for work. So why would I need an occupational therapist for my child? Yeah. So occupation isn't what we just do for work. It's one of the occupations we have, but occupation is everything we do in our day. Occupation is meaningful engagement and what we need to do and what we want to be able to do. So occupational therapists are here to support people to identify what are the things in their life that are tricky for them, what do they want to be able to do, what do they need to be able to do, and what can we do as therapists to either change the task so that they're more independent, change the environment so that environment matches what that person needs to be able to do it, or build skills in that person to be more independent or more functional within that activity. So we can support any range of occupations, whether that being someone in their workplace, if you were thinking about adult therapy, in terms of rehab after injury, etc., is a very traditional view, isn't it, of what OT does. But within mental health, we can be looking at people participating more in the community again after they might not have felt confident to do so for a really long time. Within pediatrics, that's around what that child wants to be able to do and what that child needs to be able to do in their day, at home, in the community, at school, and us scaffolding that to make them successful in those activities.
Fantastic. And so, once again, it's obviously going to be hard to go into the finite detail of how it works, but what is the science behind occupational therapy? So, when you get that goal and you're looking at how you support that person through that goal, how are you looking at the body and the brain to be able to help them with that?
And I guess that's really different to other areas where you are looking at a specific part. The role of OT is more to be, I guess, that external view of breaking down the activity, the task. So the task that they're doing, breaking down the person's skills of what are the skills they've got, what are the skills they don't yet have, and what is it in the environment that is successful for that person or that might be impacting them that means they can't do what it is they need to be able to do. So it's a really different science, I guess, in terms of that we're not just looking at the person, but we're looking at that person within their environment and in accordance with their values and what is important for them in where they are. So it's so different in terms of there is no one specific science, I guess, to it, because it's the ability to look at that person in their context.
That is enormous.
Yeah.
So when you think about the range of just individuals that each of us knows and how that must vary in terms of their skill sets and their needs and how they would respond, that's just I'm just thinking about that. My brain is reeling. And obviously, we have the joint context of Mr. 8, and I love just giving, I suppose, a real life example to that. How for him, for OT, he actually sees it as a place where not only he builds and connects in a relationship level, but also where he gets to express some of his favorite interests. And let's be honest, I think, he's very smart, he's very clued in. But I think we still manage, or I think you still manage, for him to do certain things without him even realizing that what he's doing is learning a life skill in the process.
And I think that's the beauty of occupational therapy, is that you're building occupational performance, it's called. So when an OT is looking at goals, from our view, we're thinking about building a child's occupational performance. So what it is that they're able to do that, I guess, means they can transfer and generalize those skills into everyday life. So for children, obviously, we need to be using play and we need to be using their interest to do that. So, I guess you are successful in your therapeutic journey with a child if they're doing what they love to do.
Yeah.
And if they're able to do what they love to do at home or in the community, because we don't just want kids to be able to learn to do things in a clinic environment. You've got to do that next step. Because if a child can't do it in their natural environment, I'm definitely failing as an OT.
Can you use the example of Mr. 8 and his love of planets and learning about body space?
So, are you thinking about our little conceptualization of books that we one day want to publish, Carly?
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Um, um, I'm thinking in particular about that hula hoop that was used so incredibly well. Um, and
There's
I
also
just
the
think it's a
birds and pigs about space,
yeah,
right?
but it's a really great display of taking his interest and showing him something that really helps him in a real life context.
So,
Um,
yeah,
so
I for sure explained that one. So yes, that wasn't about us creating and publishing books that relate space to our families and us within our worlds. But I do think that would be really exciting to do together with you.
yes,
This was in relation to Mr. Eight was having some challenges in terms of his body awareness and spatial awareness. And oh my gosh, when a child doesn't know where they are in space, it creates chaos, right?
hmm hmm
Yeah.
oh yeah,
So it is exceptionally hard. And this comes from, I'm an OT, but I have really poor body awareness myself. So I do have to be really creative in the way I work on this with kids. And yeah, Mr. 8, he loves space. And at that point was super, super duper into space. And so we used a hula hoop around the clinic to walk around and practice not bumping into the walls and the doors and to each other using our hula hoops and navigating our way around that space. And the focus, oh my gosh, the focus he spent in that session of really working out where he was because he had his space hoop around him, and then how successful he was at the end of that session and still is
mm,
in terms of navigating physical spaces and not running into walls, because there is this invisible space around us and it's around all of us. And how are we meant to visualize that as a child, right?
yeah,
That's a really tricky concept.
yeah,
So, through using interests, through practicing and not just talking about it, we weren't just sitting down talking about personal space and how personal space works. We were doing that while running and walking around the clinic and doing things in the kitchen and playing games. And, that meant that it was occupationally focused for him. It wasn't just a concept,
mm,
it was a real thing we did. And then hopefully, our kids are able to take that real thing we did in a session to home to keep doing that
yes.
real thing.
Yeah, and for quite a while, he did reference the fact that it was using the rings of Saturn that let him know what he wasn't going to be bumping into. So, which he absolutely loved. Still struggles with it in a personal context, person to person, but that's impulse control and excitement. So, that's a bit different. But he is a lot better at not tripping over chair legs and bumping into door frames.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And and you think about that, like as a family, I guess Carly, you have this impeccable understanding of OT. But if you were to be a family that don't understand what OT is, that's going to be really hard to articulate as a goal, isn't it? I don't want my child to be bumping into things and falling over chairs. Why would you think about bringing that up to a therapist?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so I'm actually going to throw a question back to you here.
Yeah. Go for it.
I guess, can you remember what it was for you as a mum that made you think, I'm going to bring that up with Steph, or how that came about?
So I think there were two things. There was the knowledge that he was regularly bumping into things and hurting himself. And because of all the things that go into who he is, including a high level of hypervigilance and anxiety, when that would happen, it wouldn't be, ouch, I bumped into something. It would be screaming and flailing and crying, because the response would feel so huge for him that it would take 15 minutes, 20 minutes to calm down from. So it was intervening with his life. And therefore, it was something that was really important to bring up.
Yeah.
Um,
So see there how that right there was what made it occupational performance.
yes,
So
yes,
the bumping into things and the spatial awareness, yeah, it's a skill, but the occupation was actually around interacting with people
yes.
and navigating his spaces without injuring himself, because
100%.
none of us want to be
100%.
hurting ourselves and falling over stuff. So that's actually the occupations that we were working on through that. The bottom level skill, if you think about bottom up approach, the bottom level skills were around understanding body and space.
Yes.
But that's not actually the goal per se, is it?
And the other element from a mum, and I think that, this is probably any parent, you don't want your child to be overly familiar with other people because it creates risk. And it also, and, this is probably a loaded thing to say, but once again, I think we'll all understand, is that it creates an element of difference that can make other people feel very uncomfortable with your child, and you don't want that either. So, those things as well, they all factored into wanting to make sure that he was able to understand his proximity to things.
That's right. Yeah. But I guess that for me demonstrates the role of OT beautifully, because it is around what were actually the occupations that were impacted by that skill. And that's what we want to see change. Increasing body awareness isn't like, how do you measure that? You've got no way of knowing whether that's achieved or not. But you can talk to a family to find out how often, when you guys go out and about, is that young person getting too close to other people where it is creating discomfort, or where other people are moving away, or how many times is that young person injuring themselves, on a weekly basis. They're things you can measure and know whether your therapeutic input has been successful or not.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking specifically of this example, and it can be different with other things, but with this specific example, we got a lot of recommendations around the circle of safety, which, look, it's really important. It's really important for children to understand. But in this particular instance, understanding the circle of safety wasn't actually going to change that interaction, because we just weren't aware where we were putting ourselves. And that, when we leant on someone, we didn't just put our body weight on them, we put our whole body weight on them.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's very interesting.
I think that's where, from a neurodiversity perspective, but also a trauma-informed perspective, that's where the role of OT, as you said, is often the starting place and is quite integral, I guess, in terms of that journey for therapy, because we know that kids are doing the best they can with what they got, thinking about all of Ross Green's work there, and that it's around skill, not will. Kids are trying the best. So what are the skills that they don't have yet that are impacting them on their day-to-day basis? And that is where we come in. To be very, I don't know, that sounds a little bit overconfident, doesn't it?
No, not at all. Not at all. 14 years experience, Steph. It's not overconfident. It's honest. It's honest. So, look, we've kind of talked about one specific example there, and I might be asking you how long a piece of string is, because I know that there are so many different areas. But can you highlight some key, when we're dealing with neurodivergent children, some key types of support focus areas that you often work in?
Yeah. And I was thinking about this in preparing for our chat today. I was like, oh, wow, there used to be just very key focus areas that OT were known for, and then we'd refer on for others. But I feel every discipline had, in terms of, when I say discipline, I mean OT, and I mean psych, and I mean social work, and I mean speech pathology. We've all overlapped a lot more these days in terms of our skill areas and what we're working on. And I think that is amazing. It's awesome, because I think we can get much better outcomes for people, but it's also broadened for all of us. What are the domain areas we do work on? Because when I first started in my career in 2009, if a child had emotional related goals, in terms of being able to share their feelings, it'd be, oh, you need to go and see a psych, off you go. That's what you do with the psychologist. Whereas I guess there's been so much more research done in terms of the role that OT can have on that domain area now. So you might have an OT and a psychologist both working on emotional regulation type roles. So, I know that doesn't answer your question, but it's become a lot more wide than it used to be.
So if you were just to summarize the key domains, what do you think you'd say?
Yeah. So It is a really big area, but I do think a child being able to look after themselves, so their self-care skills, so being able to look after themselves in terms of their personal self-care, so it might be getting dressed, having a shower, but also looking after their space, so being involved in doing things around the home, because we should be expecting kids to be helping us out around the home. And it's an area that overall, and certainly not just in neurodivergent space, but overall, we're not expecting kids to do as much as we used to.
Mm, mm,
So I think that's a really big area, and I think that's actually a really critical area for us to be working on with our current population of kids
mm,
and families. Their play skills as well, because the power of play. Children learn through play. That is how they learn language. That is how they learn problem solving. That is how they learn to advocate for themselves and to
mm,
negotiate with other
mm,
people and
mm.
share their ideas and advocate for their ideas. Play is so incredibly important. Leisure, so being able to chill out and relax. What do they like to do in their downtime? What structure do they need to be able to enjoy downtime? Sleep and rest is a whole other area we work on, which is massive in itself. um, and then obviously that area of being able to go to school, so that's why often people will have school related goals, because it might be around kids being able to manage their belongings at school, being able to know the routines at school, know how the transitions work and supporting around that. And then obviously there's that really big area around social participation and social competency skills, and being able to work with the whole family and the whole unit around the child to help that child be as successful as they want to be in terms of social engagement.
Yes, just a couple of things then.
Just a couple of things,
Yes,
yeah.
it's not very major.
Not very major, yeah. And that's where it's so important that OTs are good at working with the other disciplines involved for your child, because we can be crossing all of these areas.
Mm,
But if you've got a speech pathologist involved, a dietitian involved, a physiotherapist involved, a psychologist involved, your OT really does need to be talking with each of those professionals.
mm.
Everyone needs to be working out who's going to work on which piece, so that you're working together as a team, because you could see how confusing that might possibly get.
Most definitely. And I put the call out again. I think I did it when we were having our FAS Day episode. If there are any IT geniuses listening who want to create an amazing allied health program that allows them to share client information, I think it would absolutely revolutionize the neurodivergent space. It's not there yet, and I don't think my health record goes anywhere near cutting it. I'm not even sure if it hits the allied health space. So if someone could, come up with that, that would be incredible.
There is one app out there, and I can't think of the name of it for now, but I will send it through to you, Carly, and you can always pop it in
Mm,
the information. There's a couple of apps out there, but you have to create certain subscriptions, and even that's hard enough then as a family to coordinate with the therapists around who is happy to sign up to that app and use that app. And there's a whole bunch of stuff around information security and information sharing that are all challenges across practices around that too. But you're spot on, it needs to be done.
it does. It does. I mean, we all need extra admin in our lives, but it would definitely be helpful. I'm thinking about, as you've run through that list there, and I'm thinking about all three, because all three of mine, as you know, are doing OT. And gosh, Mr. 8, his goals, because of the support required, are big and varied. And we've done everything from, really basic gross motor through to understanding how to use the toilet, to, as we were talking about, personal space, motor planning, and then thinking about Mr. Almost 7, and, how his is covering things like being able to visually scan and process information, persistence in a task. It definitely improved fine motor strength. And then, Miss 4 is smack bang in social and emotional. And that's exactly where, play is being used to help her learn those skills. And that's all through the one stream of support. So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And that's where every OT will also work really differently. So I think it is really important for families to be aware that when they're starting with an OT, it's important, I guess, to find out, well, what frameworks does that OT like to use? How do they like to work towards goals? Because, you would know in my practice, I very much prioritize family-centered practice. And that's why, we have our parent sessions and we do lots of talking about, let's break down what's happening at home and problem solving that. But everyone does work differently. So it is important, I guess, to go in with a clear idea of what you're wanting from therapy.
I think the other thing, and this becomes evident in the relationships you create, but it's also about rapport. That's a very hard thing to pick up from a website or someone else's recommendation. And it really is like, you got to try it. That's just how it works. But the family and the child need to be able to have rapport, because if you want to create trusting, functional relationships, you need to be able to get along. And it's so intrinsic. And there's nothing offensive about that either. If you don't have that rapport, if you don't click, that's all right. It just means it's not the right fit.
100%. And it doesn't mean that discipline's not for you. OT doesn't work for us, or psych doesn't work for us, or speech pathology doesn't work for us. It is about finding the right relationships for your family. Because as an OT, if a family doesn't feel comfortable opening up with me about their deepest, darkest worries, I'm not hitting the mark. So I do need families to be able to develop that trust with me. And I've always said through my career that, we are in a very honored space that families do develop that trust to open up, because that takes a huge amount of vulnerability, right? But if you don't have that with your therapist and you feel you're guarding information, you're not getting the most out of your journey.
Yeah, completely. 100%. And look, once again, using us as an example, Mr. Six sees someone else in your clinic, and if you swapped, I can't imagine the relationships working. I can't imagine Mr. 8 with Eddie, and I can't imagine Mr. 6 with you.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how it just has to be that right dynamic to also know how to get the best out of the child as well.
Yeah. Which is where, and I think this is something that I like. We do as a practice, we do try to match therapists to kids in terms of not only the family, but what sort of approach would that child need? Because we've got different types of therapists in our practice, and that's good. Some therapists are a lot more loud and externally playful, and others are a lot more soft and gentle. And some kids need a really soft and gentle approach, and some kids need a really confident, clear approach. So you do have to be able to match those personalities, and sometimes you're not going to get it right.
That's it. Yeah.
And as therapists, we do develop skills. I was actually having this conversation over lunch a little while ago, how I think therapists are actually, one key area of skill of a therapist is to be an actor, because you have to be able to put on a certain personality, present a certain way, be a certain something for that child. So, it takes time for your therapist to be able to learn your child and you, and what do you need out of that journey, so that therapist can bring that to the table, because I, as you know, I'm quite a clear communicator, but I'm also, quite playful in my approach. I'm quite energetic. I am really loud. I'm a loud human. But
never noticed.
No, never. But then I've also got other kids where I'll definitely come in a lot more soft, and today, and I'll be a lot more gentle about what we're doing, compared to, all right, here we are, we need to sort out our plan for our session, let's go. So you do learn what you need to bring to the table and what you need to leave out of the room.
And I think that's definitely a skill that's much more obviously required in the pediatric space.
Yes.
As adults, generally, we learn how to navigate each other based on what we need out of the other person. It's just a skill that hopefully we learn as we grow up. But with children, they don't have it. We don't want them to have it, actually, as children. We want them to just be able to be, I
Them.
like you, I don't like you, you're too loud, you're too quiet. That's my jam right there. Um, and so that's definitely an additional skill that's required in the pediatric space, as well as play. I mean, it would be amazing if that was part of all of our everyday life learning experiences and we accepted that as adults. We don't. So it's such a fundamental part of the child journey, to integrate it through play. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And then it's my job to bring that play and bring that imagination back for parents. Because as you said, as adults, we lose it. We're so
Mhm.
busy and we've got so much to think about. And then us therapists go in and go, oh, be more playful and think about it in this creative, fun way, so that it's our role as therapists to almost bring you back to your own childhood a little bit
Yes.
and
Yeah.
bring the fun back.
Yeah.
Mm.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Needed on
But
big,
hard,
long, exhausting weeks.
so
The
hard,
reminder is needed.
just for teeny tiny amounts.
So, look, we kind of touched on it already, but I think we could probably deep dive a little bit more into working together with other therapeutic supports. Um, the key thing that was mentioned is communication, and 100%, like, especially when everything crosses over the way that it does these days, communication is the most intrinsic part. But who do you find that you have the most connections with what you're doing?
So I would say teachers are a really big part. We have to work with teachers as partners. And I think it is really important for families to know that when you are asking your therapist to work alongside a teacher, you might, as a family, you might think, oh, this teacher needs some strategies for X, Y, Z at school. It might be around supporting that child to transition out to the playground for lunch and recess. And, oh, could you please go in and give them some support around that? But as therapists, we need to definitely be working alongside teachers. We aren't the expert. We've got our way of seeing things that we can break things down, but the teacher also has their way of working and their way of seeing things and the constraints that they're in within the education department as well. So it is around definitely working in partnership rather than just go in and give strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So let's problem solve it together on an even level and recognize each other's strengths and what we're bringing to the table. So I think that's the first key one outside families
Mm.
would be working alongside educators. But obviously then all of the therapeutic disciplines from there, so as I said, I always think it's you need to have a good relationship with the pediatrician, so sending updates to the ped, and hopefully getting those back as well in terms of sharing information and knowing where things are at. Because as a family going into a pediatrician appointment, you can't talk about everything that's been going on. You're under the pump when you go into a ped appointment and you've got a certain amount of time. So as therapists, it is our role to be, I guess, making sure that we're supporting the family in terms of those updates and that communication. And then obviously, the social workers and psychologists from a mental health perspective, speech pathologists around communication and social engagement, feeding, that's a huge area of crossover between
Mm.
speech and OT, and then dietitian as well within that. So really working as a good trio there. Physio when it comes to motor skills. I've got some beautiful physios here in Ballarat that I like to work alongside in terms of goals and doing joint support with
Mm.
here. And then you've got other areas of support such as art therapy, music therapy, equine therapy. So I've even done joint sessions with equine therapists before around how we might embed more interoceptive work within the equine therapy space, because there's so much interoceptive input you're getting during that time as well. So, there's creative ways of working in collaboration with all disciplines, isn't there? Which is great.
Can
But I
I get
think
you to just quickly, for those who are listening, to define interoception for us, just really high level, without us diving way into a
yeah.
side quest?
Look, I think that's a whole nother episode
It
side.
100% is. It's on my list. Don't worry.
And it's such a buzzword at the moment. So, a few years ago, I would have done a workshop about sensory processing, and you'd say the word interoception, and no one would know what you're talking about. And I feel it's something that everyone seems to be talking about a lot more at the moment. But interoception is that ability to tune into body cues. So it's that ability to notice, understand what something means, and respond to it in terms of, it might be information about temperature, it might be information about heart rate, etc. As you said, could easily deep dive. But I'd say that's my very summarized version, would be tuning into body cues and knowing
Yes.
what they mean.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Like when Mr. 8 puts on his shoes the wrong way, and I say to him, can't you feel that they're feeling the wrong way? And he goes,
No.
no.
Yeah. What are you talking about? They're
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. That is interoception.
That is interoception.
That is interoception. But I guess in addition to working with educators and therapy supports, as OT, we do have a big role in thinking about the community as well. So for older kids, and this isn't something we've done with Mr. 8 yet because it's not a priority area, but I do so much work with kids out and about in the community, whether it's at the library, the supermarket, the local cafes, all of the different places kids need and want to be able to go to. So, I've got subways around Ballarat that know when I come in with a client, not to prompt that client, and they know to communicate with my young person, not with me, because they know what I'm there for. So that's another role of mine around, I guess, supporting young people within their community settings. So developing those relationships in the community is really important to work towards those goals. But in addition, it might be sporting areas and that type of thing. So going to gymnastics or going to karate or going to the music lessons, whatever it might be, to support that person's goals within that environment.
So just humour me here. How long do you have to study to be an occupational therapist?
4 years. And I was thinking about this. Did you know that sensory regulation, because everyone thinks OTs do sensory regulation, right? That's what we go to OT for. We go for sensory regulations. In pediatrics, that's what they think we do all the time. I actually don't think I was ever told what sensory regulation is at uni. I was thinking about this. And I was like, no, I strongly don't feel they may have now. I mean, I did study a really, really, really long time ago, so maybe things have changed. Regulation was certainly
Dinosaurs are
never
extinct now.
uni.
Yeah.
You were taught how to look at people, break down their occupational roles, break down their environments, and work on that. At no point were we taught what sensory regulation was or what this was or what that was. That's all learning as you go.
Well, I was just thinking how many things they would have to cram into each lecture and tute for the diversity of, yeah, wow. Okay.
No, and I supervise a lot of students, and I always make sure I have a good conversation with students that when you come into a placement, particularly a placement like ours where we are seeing such a wide variety of kids in quite a specialized area in that way, that you are not expected to rock up at placement and know how to provide therapy. What I want you to be able to do as a student is know how to see someone. That's what you learn at uni, is how to view a person and their occupational performance. That's what you're taught to do at uni. You're not taught how to be a therapist. You'll learn that as you go.
Kudos then, because that's huge. That's absolutely huge. Yeah, my brain's just wrapping around that, but that's an aside. So I love how a lot of conversations, often when I go to ask a question, we've kind of woven through it to some degree, but we'll just bring it back and highlight it. Why do you see that in the last probably 5, maybe 8 years, OT has been seen as such a fundamental part of skill development, particularly in the neurodivergent space?
I think for me, it's around the fact that we've always been involved in multidisciplinary teams OTs have always, I guess, been known to see a bigger picture. And that I think with increased knowledge around neurodiversity and the need to respect someone for who they are, I think it naturally brings about a holistic role like OT, because you're not trying to fix someone.
Mm-hmm.
You're not even necessarily trying to change someone.
Mm.
You are there to go, you are you, and this is what you need to be able to do what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah, most definitely. It totally makes sense. So what you're looking at is the desire of the individual.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for me, that's where it's become more and more important for OTs to be involved, because we're not looking at a bottom up, I guess, approach of going, these are all the skills a human needs to develop in their life.
Mm.
You know, we are very much, and well, me as a therapist particularly, I'm very top down. So I like to look at what does participation need to look like for that person? And then what are the skills they need to be able to do that thing? So that's called a top-down approach, where you're thinking about their overall goal rather than necessarily thinking about all of the foundational skills that people are meant to develop over their life.
Neurotypicals are meant to develop over their life.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the issue with assessment tools and that type of thing. So I think that would actually be something for me, as if I was a family and I'm starting OT, you know, don't necessarily go in and think you need all this assessment from an OT. You might need certain assessments to understand your child if you're feeling a little bit lost, you know, in terms of what they can and can't do, or what they should and shouldn't be able to do yet. Or if you're wanting more information about their sensory patterns, you know, those sorts of things can absolutely go, yep, assessments are good. But just because you're starting therapy doesn't mean you need assessment, because assessments are based off neurotypical populations.
And they're a deficit model.
And a deficit model, yeah. There's very few assessments that look at what children can do. You know, they're looking at what kids can't do. So it's not really setting you as the family up for success of embracing individuality.
That's beautifully said.
So I think it's just something to think about. Because most families, you would think, oh, I need an assessment and I need a report. You know, that's that medical model instilled values, right?
What the NDIS tells us as well.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I could have a full conversation about that one.
Yep.
You know, so I think just be careful there as a family when you're starting therapy of what are you wanting from the journey? So what do you need to advocate for? Because as therapists, often we do feel a little bit of pressure to provide assessments, particularly if you've said, oh, I need a report for this. But I guess be mindful of what you're asking for and why, because OTs don't need to do formalized assessments to be able to get right stuck in there and support you with your functional goals. It's not an integral part to our journey with you.
I have to say that's probably one of the positive changes that's come out of the new, and this relates to Victorian education. So anyone listening in another state, I apologise, it's not as relevant. But with the new DIPS model, in that it actually looks at what requires additional support, and it doesn't need to be based on a PEP3. It doesn't need to be based on, in fact, I think the only assessment that's required for DIPS is a Vineland. And that's 24 pages of your life gone. But besides that, you know, I know when we were looking at aid funding, at educational support funding, it was all about what assessments could be done, because it needed to be baselined. And because this newer model is more about accommodations.
It is, yeah.
The need for those multiple assessments isn't heavy.
There. Yeah. It's all based on the strategies, not on the quantitative scores, which is great.
It is. Yeah, it's a really good move.
Yeah.
And it'd be amazing if lots of other areas that look at support requirements looked at that in place of other things. Cough, cough. Off the soapbox. So speaking of assessments, we did have a question that came through for this particular episode, and it was asking how an OT, or can an OT, help with different types of diagnoses.
And we can support towards a journey of diagnosis, but we can't provide a diagnosis per se. So OTs often have a role when it comes to looking at ASD and even ADHD. A lot of pediatricians will ask families to access an OT for a sensory assessment, particularly when it comes to looking at ADHD and ASD. I do the ADOS, so the Autism Diagnostic Observational Schedule. So families are looking at an ASD assessment. OTs can certainly be part of that process. But then it comes down to, a consensus diagnosis. So you would be getting information from all of your other sources as well. So your speech pathologist, your psychologist, and the pediatrician would be making the final, diagnosis consensus around that. But then as well, looking at things like developmental coordination disorder, looking at specific learning disorder. So psychologists may ask us to do assessments around dysgraphia, which is around challenges with handwriting. So we're involved in processes around that. And developmental coordination disorder is often mainly our assessment and then signed off by the pediatrician. And I'll often get a physio's opinions as well when looking at that, to look at those. So they're, the main diagnosis type assessment processes that we're involved in.
To know. I actually, before I ask what is probably our last question, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask if there's anything in particular as an OT you feel like you'd really like to share and want families to know.
Ooh, I think the biggest thing that I want families to know is that the OT isn't the expert. The OT has a way of seeing things. You as the family, you're the expert of your child. Your child's the expert of themselves. So it's our role as an OT to bring all those things together and to help you to problem solve. It's not our job to fix things as the OT. So I think that would be my big thing, is that the OT's role is to bring a lens to the picture and a framework for you as the family to go, okay, let's think about this particular goal and what it is that are the barriers for our child at the moment around achieving that goal. What are the little steps as a family we can do at home to support our child to achieve their goals? The OT isn't going to do that. We don't have a magic wand. Mine broke. It's a real shame, But we don't have a wand, but it is a way of looking at things. So that's our role as a therapist, to help you be able to problem solve that and work on those goals. I think that's the big thing for me. Fabulous. That we're not special. We don't have a wand. It's you guys that do the work. And we're just here to help.
So much to take in and think about. So much. So I've got one final question. And if you would prefer to do a top 3, I'm okay with that as well, because sometimes picking one is really hard. But what do you think in a family home is the best therapeutic tool that we can have to support our children from an OT perspective?
Can I be really annoying?
Yes.
The parent.
I knew you were going to say that.
There's no tool, there's no object. There is no wand out there, by the way. No one has the special wand. It's the family. It's the family as a whole, and it's the magic that families create together and the vibe you guys have together that makes things special and awesome. So yeah, no, there is no special thing. There is no object. I think quality time together. I think as a mum, a dad, an auntie, an uncle, a grandparent, whoever you are as an adult that's listening to this, your ability to look at that child and see how awesome they are and see how cool they are and all the great things they can do and all the great ways that they think about the world, that's the tool.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really annoying, isn't it?
That's okay. I'm going to add in a trampoline.
Blanket?
Because a trampoline also gives parents moments of sanity.
But there's so many token items. There's so many token items that people I need to talk to the OT about getting this thing. And yes, there are tools that are certainly helpful, right? You know, and yes, trampolines are awesome. Yes, climbing frames are awesome. Yep, fidget tools are awesome. Yep, visuals are awesome. Yep, chat about all that stuff. But if you're going to think about one thing that you need in your home, it's you guys. Yeah. You know, we actually had a really gutsy conversation just before we started recording this around, you know, what people need at home, and that it's so not about the special things, right? It's about the interactions. But I got told I'd be a little bit, you know, wanky if I said parents. But there you go, I did it. But we were talking about how there are no tools that people need at home. If you've got pots and pans, you've got a bunch of toys. If you've got cardboard boxes at home, you've got a bunch of toys right there. You know, my fondest memories as a child are making these incredible cardboard box homes with my dad in this playroom. It's not about the fancy things that I might have got given for Christmas or birthday if I was really lucky. That's the memory I've got.
Yeah.
But really, it's not about the box, is it? It's about dad.
It's about dad. It is about dad.
So, sorry, it's the humans in the home.
I will say, though, something that I'm seeing at the moment. So I've already mentioned, I think, that our Mr. 8 is now doing virtual school. And in complete honesty, also a topic that we will be discussing in a future episode, I found for a number of years it was difficult to feel close and connected because there was so much anxiety. There was so much of a response to how his nervous system was reacting to his day that I wasn't getting to see the inner magic of Mr. 8, and it was clouded in a lot of confusion that was expressed as rage. And so, yeah, it's something now that is unfolding before me, and I probably haven't seen it in its natural state since he was maybe about 4. So it's a big thing. It's a really big thing. It's also a big thing to change my own expected response to the relationship because of what things have previously been. So there's a big learning curve going on right now.
Yeah.
But I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is that can be the challenge, and I just want to honor that challenge for parents. And that's why having great supports that you know fit your family can be so incredibly important, because sometimes you can be in a space where you're not getting to see the child you know.
Yeah.
You're getting to see, and it is, you know, as is frequently said, it is because they trust you. It is because you are safe with them that they are letting it all go, but you are seeing the output of the distress of their day, and you can miss the magic.
Yes.
And so I think that's why it's a really great thing to take the opportunity to bring in the skill sets of supports to understand how they can then take some pressure from your child and help them to understand themselves better, and let you then do the magic of the relationship when they're at home.
Absolutely. And I think for you as the family to be able to have that parent session with the therapist to go, everything sucks. And this is dark right now. And this is awful. And all of these things are happening, so that you can let it out so that you can be supported by that therapist, so that then you can afterwards see those little bits of magic as well.
That's
So
it.
you've got to have someone that you can share the dark stuff with, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to go, I know all these things are really challenging right now. Let's break down what it is that we want to work on and what it is that we don't at the moment.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. As a certain wise woman said to me the other day, Steph, you can't work on everything at once.
You can't, no. I don't think I was very gentle in telling you that either.
You can't be gentle telling me that. You have to hit me in the face with it. That's who I am.
Yep.
And that comes down to rapport, circling
It
back.
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's our role, to go on that journey with you.
But it's also just also pointing that out, that the dark conversations are okay, because parents of neurotypical kids have the days where they're like, oh my God, my child drove me insane today and I love them, but I really don't like them. You add the extra layer of everything else that they bring to you because of what the world brings to them.
Mm-hmm. And the
it is
pressure
okay.
and the stress they're under
Yes.
every single moment of it, every single day. And as parents, we want to hold all of that because we want to fix it and we want to make it all okay, you know? Yeah.
So it's okay for some days to be, language warning, shit.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And when it is, have someone you can talk to about it.
That's it. Exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Okay. Wow. Well, I knew the conversation around what is an OT was going to be big. But we've covered a lot of ground today, which is fantastic. I really hope that we've demystified, by kind of almost confusing them again, some of the things that OT does. And look, I think the biggest thing that's come out of it is the methodology of how OT works. There isn't an instruction book for us to understand, but we do understand what the focus is, what their outcome goal is, and what they want to do. And I'm really glad we also talked about, the right kind of ways of finding the right support and what that relationship looks like. I think it's really important for parents to know that they have permission to say, this is not the right fit. We need to find the right fit for us. And as you said, and I always think that the red flag is when any kind of support doesn't say this to you. At the end of the day, parents and the children are the experts. The supports are there to support you. Yeah. So, anything you want to add, Steph?
Look, I don't think so. I think it really is around find your community. Find the therapist you feel you need. As much as NDIS or as much as pediatricians might say you need this and this, and I think sometimes you need some guidance of where to start. Find what works for your family. Just because you've been told you need one specific discipline doesn't mean that's all you need and that's what you need to focus on. You need to find the people that you connect with that are going to help you for your child. It doesn't necessarily clearly matter what their discipline is, as long as they're working on the goals that are important to you. The worst thing you can do is send your child to therapy because you think they need therapy, or to send your child for fortnightly sessions because that's what you've been told to do. You need to do what's important for your family.
Perfectly summarised. Well, it was a pleasure again, Steph. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Always happy.
Be sure to check the show notes on our website for any links and references. You can find us at youcangrowyourownway.podbean.com. And if you found this episode helpful, we would love you to help us get the word out. You can share the podcast, tell a friend, and be sure to click the follow or subscribe button so you can access all our new episodes. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, where we would love to connect with you. You Can Grow Your Own Way recognises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of this place, now known as Australia. We're coming to you from Jabberung, Jawajali and Wadawurrung country, the country of our guest speaker, and from wherever you are listening. We respect the elders of the past and present, and we share our friendship and kindness.